All right, welcome. I appreciate everybody spending a little time with me this afternoon. I caught a good portion of yesterday and I thought it was a great kickoff. I really enjoyed the fireside chat. I know the CTF is like going like gangbusters. I know a lot of people put work in on that. So really fantastic start to this event, and I'm really pleased to be able to participate. So I originally named this Cyber Cataclysm. I was kind of intentionally trying to avoid the word pandemic, but I've kind of renamed it Kaos Corp, and I'll illuminate why that is. This is part of CyberFest 2020, and this is the red-blue lab/workshop. And my name is Alex Keller. I work for the Stanford School of Engineering, and I do data center operations and systems and security and some networking and some virtualization and some storage. So I do a little bit of everything. I'm also the advisor to the Stanford Applied Cyber Student Group and the coach of their competition team, the cyber competition team. And so I've borrowed their code of conduct that I want to share with you because I think it's pretty good. Just to say that, be lawful, be honorable, be respectful, protect yourself and your institution at all times, practice coordinated and responsible disclosure, seek guidance from trusted peers, demonstrate intentional and accountable use of technology, and apply yourself for the benefit of the public interest and endeavor to make the world safer and more secure. And I think you could probably sum all this up into just be awesome, right? So just wanted to get that out of the way. Some of the techniques, the offensive techniques we're going to be looking at should only be conducted in a controlled environment against hosts that you have explicit permission to do so. Deviating from that could get you in a lot of trouble. So I just want to get that out of the way. So I'd like to advance this idea that, and I'm going to use this term blue team and red team. And so I'll describe that for those who aren't familiar. So blue team is usually used to describe people who are performing kind of defensive operations for an institute or a business or a university. These are folks who are implementing defensive fortifications, doing forensics. They're basically the defenders, the operational defenders. And red team is usually used to describe kind of the offensive folks, right? The people who are engaging targets to find vulnerabilities, who have a mindset to be offensive. And in many companies, there are dedicated red teams as well as dedicated blue teams. So that's where those terms come from. And there's kind of a new term that everybody's using called purple teaming, which is this idea that you kind of do both. And I'm not real fond of that term, but that's really the concept that I'm trying to advance here. And I really like this quote from John Stuart Mill, which is, "He who knows only his side of the case knows little of that." So, a lot of defensive people, myself included, whether you're a systems administrator, a network analyst, a DevOps person, a web application developer, we do learn some defense along the way. And traditionally, we haven't been very good about this, but I'd say in the last 5 years, it seems like the idea that that people who work in technology need to embrace security from all angles, and not just, that security is not just the purview and the responsibility of security people, but it's really all of our responsibility. And so I think the last few years, I think that's gotten a lot better. And I think Stanford's done a great job at that, obviously, with the training that we have here, and this idea that security really, and understanding best practices, is everybody's responsibility in technology. So we've done a pretty good job of that. But in many cases, defenders think offense is like somehow magical. We have this concept of you know, the guy in the hoodie, right, in the basement, and it's dark, and he's hacking, and he's got some Uber program that, you know, takes over servers. And, you know, we've been watching too much Mr. Robot, which is actually pretty authentic. But we have this idea that it's kind of magical. And I've been working in computers for, you know, a couple decades, and I've been doing security for the last decade or more. And I always thought it was really magical. I was like, wow, those people are so cool, man. I wish I could do that, but I'll never be able to do that. And it wasn't until I actually started looking at some of these techniques that it really, you know, you kind of look under the covers, or you pull the hood open, and you start to understand how offensive techniques work. And it was like a revelation for me. It was like it really opened my eyes to why many of the defensive things that we were doing made sense, why other things didn't make sense, and it provided context that really wasn't there. And so I'm advancing this idea that in order to do good defense, you really need to understand some offense, and vice versa. If you really want to be a good red teamer, you probably need to understand defensive stuff as well. So it requires context in both ways. And the offensive mindset in red teams are fairly uncommon in higher education. Notwithstanding, and kudos to Michael Tranduff and Jack Cable and others who were involved in starting Stanford's bug bounty program, which is one of the only bug bounty programs in higher ed. There might be like a couple at best. So notwithstanding that, you know, if you look across higher education, understanding of kind of offensive mindset and tradecraft is like virtually non-existent. And you know, there's probably a number of reasons for that, but there's far more of a deficit in higher ed than there are in other industries, many other industries. So I'd also like to advance another idea that experimentation is critical to kind of the evolution of skills, right? We need, you know, this sounds cliche, but we need safe spaces to fail. This stuff is messy, and it doesn't actually work the first time a lot of times, and it breaks things. And we need places, we need lab environments, we need development environments, we need opportunities to play with things that we wouldn't, you know, otherwise have. Far too often the mantra is stand something up, get it into production, and then don't touch it. Right? Nobody wants to touch it. It's like, oh, well, it's working. And then it becomes, we do like IT folklore. So it's like many moons ago, we stood up this web server, and no one knows how it works anymore, but don't touch it, right? And you know, that's pretty common, I think, in many industries, but it's not a recipe for advancing your skill set. We need to try new techniques, tactics, and technologies. You need to build it, you need to break it, you fix it, you rinse, and you repeat, and it's messy. And it needs to be authentic. You know, when I started learning security stuff, there were a lot of like kind of training modules and stuff like that, where they would present these like simulated machines that you would work on that taught like some, you know, single aspect of, you know, oh, this is going to teach you the difference between authentication versus authorization, or this is the principle of least privilege. And I think some of those are, you know, certainly those are things that you should learn. But for me, you know, and I think a lot of people, the real learning happens when it's hands-on, right? Where it's visceral, and you're dealing with, you know, technology, and the systems that we operate today are inherently complex. They are, you know, they have idiosyncrasies and dependencies, and they misbehave in, you know, unpredictable ways. You know, they don't always, you know, fail the same way. And you know, lab modules, a lot of the lab modules out there and stuff don't behave like that. And so I think it's important that we build things that have all of the, you know, same complexities, of the systems we see in the real world and more. And that we learn in that way, in a kind of an organic way, not always with a particular objective in mind. Like some of experimentation and science, if you will, is about just learning about how something works, not necessarily having the objective of, oh, well, we're going to make this more secure, or we're going to learn this particular thing. Just experimenting. Well, why does it do that? Well, why is that protocol implemented that way? Well, why are we seeing this in clear text? And it's that curiosity and experimentation that I think is critical that we foster. So I decided for this exercise that I would build a little mini lab. And in the vein of, what I just said about actually presenting authentic machines. And so I found an old Dell 720, which has got to be like 10 years old now, and I put Proxmox on it. So we use VMware in production, and I'm pretty comfortable with ESXi, the free version. But we started supporting a lab or two that were using Proxmox, and I had heard good things about it. So I just decided, well, why not take this opportunity to learn something new and experiment? So I had to kind of wrap my head around that. Hypervisor is just a fancy word for a virtualization platform that has kind of low performance loss. That's sometimes referred to as a type 1 hypervisor, which means it runs pretty close to the bare metal. So in this, if you look at the diagram here, if you look at the diagram, and I'm a terrible artist, but the green is Stanford network, and the Proxmox hypervisor sits on the Stanford net. And then there's a pfSense firewall router that's been virtualized. And pfSense is it's an open source, free, kind of commercial grade router firewall that's pretty popular. It has a nice GUI and a strong CLI, and it's completely free. So a lot of people use it for a variety of both production and kind of home lab sort of things. It's the learning curve is not particularly, easy, but it's extremely powerful, and it's certainly easier than something like VIOS. So if you're looking for a decent open source router firewall, it's a nice place to start. And it's virtualized on the Proxmox hypervisor. And then there's some target VMs, and these I got a typo in there. They reset every 4 hours, not every 5 hours. So they reset at noon, 4, 8, 12, 4 a.m., 8 a.m., noon. So every 4 hours, all the target VMs reset so that so that you get back to kind of a steady state. And then the diagram on the diagram in this slide shows the machines. So right now in the lab there are 5 machines. 4 of those are targets, and the 5th one is a Kali Linux box that can be used to attack the other machines. I have some other goodies up my sleeve that I plan to release later this week, but this is the starting configuration. I've also, I guess, one little thing I'll point out is, so in order to get the entire lab is in a private network in the 172.20.20.0/24 space. So /24 means that the total number of IPs go from 20.1 to 20.254. But you can only get to that if you connect to an open VPN server that's running on the pfSense router. So the pfSense is running and terminates open VPN connections from the outside, and those can be established from the public internet or from Stanford Net, and we'll kind of go how to do that. So that's how you get into the lab. And then the pfSense is also has an outbound VPN. So it tunnels all of its connections to back out to a commercial VPN provider. And then we exit somewhere else. I think we're exiting from Vancouver right now. So what that means is that that when you're in the lab, you're physically using the Stanford network, but logically you're completely separate. So none of the machines on the inside of the lab can see um, any of the Stanford network other than what's visible from the outside. So if you did a trace route, you would see that the first hop would be the pfSense router at 172.20.20.1, and the next hop would be somewhere out on the public internet. So that provides a little bit of protection in case somebody inadvertently decides to just scan the wrong ranges and stuff like that. We don't want people inadvertently getting themselves in trouble. All right, so there's this this link which I can put in the chat. Before I do that, I just want to say thanks to Stanford Engineering, Stanford Applied Cyber, the Stanford Cyber Policy Center, who's been big supporters of some of the work we've been doing for many years back before they were called the Policy Center. And then Nathan Bach and Ruslan Al-Jabari helped out with some of the OSINT artifacts and one of the VM configurations. So thank you for that. All right, so I'm going to load up this document. Oh, it looks like I already have it loaded. And I'm going to put this in the chat. And anybody, let me just give it a title. Anybody with a Stanford login should be able to get to it. All right, so if I see some people popping onto that doc, that means you were able to get in. I see Andrew said Vios is cool. Yeah, I am not cool enough for Vios. I tried, and I'm like, give me a GUI. But it is rock solid, I'll tell you that. All right, so here is the here's the fictitious scenario, and I'll kind of read it / paraphrase it for you. You're a security lead at a renowned university directly supporting the prestigious Scoville Lab, a research institute focused on leveraging unprecedented biotechnology to advance the use of capsaicin for medical and industrial applications. So the Scoville Lab's intellectual property is worth a lot of money, and the scientists within this facility have a history of poor documentation and secretive operations. I'm sure none of you have ever heard of anything like that before. To further isolate their operations, their entire lab infrastructure is confined to this /24 network that's completely firewalled from the main campus. You know, I'll be honest, I tried to make this as realistic as possible, but there are some aspects of this that just have to be a little bit suspension of disbelief, right? So bear with me on that. I tried to work around those the best I could as both a narrator and a technologist. On 10/17, we'll pretend that that's this morning, even though it's 10:20. At 8:22, the lab scientists working remotely because nobody can go into the lab because of COVID. So not allowed to just walk into the lab and take the servers offline. They report that they've been locked out of the network and no longer able to access anything. And then this email is sent. And I'll just leave that on the screen so you get a chance to read it. Lab infrastructure has been compromised. We have encrypted all your research data and backups. And I had actually heard from Michael Tranduff that we recently had a ransom situation. And I started this before that, and I kind of felt bad after I after I wrote this whole thing, and then as he was recounting it, it sounded actually very similar to what I was kind of planning for the scenario. But I went ahead with it anyway. I think this version is a little bit more comedic, so I hope it is. But basically, they're demanding approximately $2 million in Monero XMR cryptocurrency. Monero is commonly used by threat actors for ransom simply because it is the most difficult of the crypto coins to trace. I think it's more difficult than Bitcoin and Ethereum for sure. And then they say if you once you provide the payment of $2 million, then we'll release the decryption key and you'll never hear from us again. So We don't negotiate, and we don't respond to emails. All right, so this is the kind of the beginning of the lab portion. Effectively, what we need to do is we need to leverage OSINT, open source intelligence, to find the attacker's method of network access and to offensively engage the lab infrastructure to regain administrative control. So we're going to, they've locked us out, the bad guys have locked us out, and our job is to find the method that they're using to backdoor the network, commandeer their own method of access, offensively engage our own machines to regain control, locate the critical research data on the Active Directory domain controller, locate the encryption key, which is credible intelligence suggests is on one of the Linux servers, and then decrypt the vault containing the critical research data. So that's mission one. And all we have to go on is this email. So when I put this together, when I was putting this together and I kind of came up with the idea of the workshop, my plan today was to basically run through the whole exercise and solve it. But because it's only Tuesday and we have a full week, I've kind of amended that to suggest that what we're going to do is we're going to work through some of it together, and people can either just follow along or they can actually engage. And then we're going to try some different techniques together, but I'm not going to solve it today. I'm not going to run through the whole thing because I think there's enough fun stuff in there that it's worth foregoing that. And if there's interest at a later date, I can do like a complete run through where we do all the spoilers, right? But I want to give people a chance to play with it this coming week, and I've got some other things that I want to introduce. So the first, so I'll just pause there and see if there's any questions. All right. So this is all we have to go on is the email. So this is where I'm going to, this is like Cirque du Soleil where they pull people out of the audience, right? We know we're supposed to find an OpenVPN server and connect to it. Presumably we'll need some creds. If you're not familiar with OpenVPN, it's an open source VPN project. What unique identifiers in this email might be the starting point for our OSINT, for our open source intelligence gathering? Don't be shy. Has anybody, I've only had a couple people who have actually connected to the VPN. Has anybody that's on this call already gone through the OSINT portion? If they have, it would be great if you could. It's better than me kind of giving it away. If somebody that had gone through it could kind of walk us through it. If not, we can walk through it together. Well, I guess, does anybody want to start with throw something out there for what we should be searching for?
Maybe look for the domain name. I mean, protonmail.ch. Start looking in the logs.
Sure. We don't even know how to get into our machines, but let's just do a search for ProtonMail for this particular ProtonMail address. That's a good suggestion. So Kaos Corp at, and I should probably, considering that my browser history may give something away, I'm going to do this in a incognito window just so that it's more authentic. All right, so we get a lot of hits for ProtonMail. Don't see a lot in here. What if we just look for Kaos Corp? Okay, it looks like there's a marketing agency called Kaos Corp. Some businesses, trademark by Raytheon. That's probably not it, although you never know, right? Okay. let's say we didn't get a hit on this. Is there anything else in the email that would seem to be a unique, something unique we could search on?
Maybe some of the language in the message, or
How
like
about
the
the
amount of money.
Monero.
Okay, so I heard the way it was written, which is that's definitely possible, but also this Monero address. Let's see what we get.
Mhm.
Let's see what we get a hit on that for. All right. Well, that's very unique. And so we did get a hit on it, and it looks like it's been kind of like retweeted at what appear to be some Russian sites. And you got to be a little bit careful what you click on, obviously. But the first hit for that particular unique identifier looks interesting. It's a Reddit post. Okay. I'll give you a chance to read this. Stealth mode disruptive technology project. We are seeking discrete international partners for an exceptionally disruptive technology project with an all-star team of cybersecurity and crypto experts. Serious inquiries only. There's a public key block, and then there's the hit that we got on the XMR address. So what do you think? Where would you stem off of from here?
Email address.
Yeah, I
Name.
like that. Name or the email address. Let's give it a shot. Just try email.
One is .com, the other one is Czech.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's
I noticed that
interesting.
as well.
That's interesting. Okay, so the email address itself just gets us a hit on the post that we just saw.
What about the name by itself without the domain?
Let's try that. Okay, looks like we got some Facebook profiles. Facebook profile.
DevOps.
LinkedIn.
There we go. Let's try reloading it. LinkedIn's so much fun. Let's see if we can get it over here. All right.
APFP, beware.
All right. So what do we see? What do we see here? She's posted some, we don't know, presumably it might be a female, but we'll just say they have posted, looks like they posted a couple of activities. So something about Algo VPN, a cyber crime caper, and something about crypto. And they're apparently an analyst for a redacted company. So that's interesting. Is there anything you see in the profile here that might be worth investigating? Twitter account. Which one do you think is, you think this here? Okay. Maybe take these off. We'll go back to.
One of the other things that I would do is also see who also viewed that and see if they had some compromises, or see if they had this too. You could reach out to them and say, hey, did you get hit with this? Because I saw you were looking at this LinkedIn profile.
Like, how did you get here?
Yeah, you know,
I like that.
Share the information.
All right. Well, that definitely got us a hit. So the fact that the night owl and the at Mish and Leon, you know, looks almost exactly the same. And you see here, this looks like, let's just take a look. It looks like it's, yeah. Okay, so this looks pretty interesting. So we've got two people who clearly know each other, right? This so-called Misha Leone and Nadia LaRue. In the top of her profile here, Twitter profile, she has the acronym for that that was used by Nadia in the earlier post, NLR. So that definitely is worth taking a look at. So let's take a look at her Twitter profile, see what we can find. The first post is from Mubix, who's a prominent red teamer, talking about a particular CVE. And then a couple of other posts. Is anybody here ahead of me already? Oh, somebody, Jesse, you commented on the Rob Fuller tweet. Yeah, I've met him before. I've been on the receiving end of Rob's work, and it's not great. It's not a great place to be. All right, so she's got this trolling script kiddies, and then she's reviewed. Looks like she's got a quote from Thomas Rid, who's a disinformation expert, and then. Well, that's interesting. There's a post that doesn't have really anything other than a link. So that would seem to be certainly interesting. The next one is about soccer. Somebody said GitHub for the win. Let's check it out. All right. So this is the KC Underground GitHub account with the ominous slogan, "I might own your computer." Looking at this repo, where would you go?
Go find the source.
Which
Look at
one?
the
Which of these projects would you look at first?
Let's say
Jesse's going trapdoor.
trapdoor. Yeah, that's good.
Let's take a look. Okay, so there's two files, client access, that's interesting, client access.js and client access.py. And one was committed 27 days ago. Last commit was 27 days ago, and one of them 4 days ago. So let's take a look at the most recent commit. All right, what is this? Does anybody want to take a shot at, this appears to be some obfuscated Python. Does anybody want to take a shot at what this is?
That's good.
What does this do?
Open VPN key so they can do a sudo.
Yeah.
Probably establishing some SSH tunnel to a host somewhere.
Yeah, it looks like what
for OpenVPN in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like so it sets some variables, red and blue, right? And then it calls here at the beginning, the subprocess call. So this is the actual thing that's being called, right? So the command is sudo space openvpn space config, and then presenting the config file, which is whatever the blue variable is. So how do we get that? You can, yeah, you can run it. It won't hurt you. But don't take my word for it. Yeah, you can run it. It will sort of work. There's one little piece that
And you need the downloads directory with the OVPN in it.
yeah, well, you would, yeah, it looks like it would appear as if this is intended to be used on a Linux box because just by the pathing there and the way the slashes are going, right?
Yeah, Unix pass. And so my question is there another repository that or has their OVPN keys in it?
Well, I think if we take a look at this right here, this suggests that it's retrieving a URL that's base 64. So does anybody see any base 64 in here?
Yes.
Right underneath.
Yeah.
This looks promising, especially when you see that equals equals.
Uh-huh.
So let's do base 64 code. Okay. We got a YouTube video. Oh dear. Okay, so we've been rickrolled. So that clearly is was meant to throw us off. What would we do from here? We're in the right place, but maybe the wrong time.
We'll look at the 27-day-year-old one.
It's a good call.
That's different.
Yeah, this doesn't look like base 64. Nope. What if we go look at the commits for client access? So if we click on history, we'll see that they actually had 2 commits 4 days ago, one right after the other. So let's look at this commit here. Interesting. Okay,
Ooh,
so what's this?
Yeah, it was a long
This
one.
is a much longer base 64. Well, that looks promising.
Mhm.
Let's do that this is the one slightly contrived step because I don't want this VPN file leaking, obviously, to the public internet. So, so you do need to be authed to get this file. So I'll go ahead and post that link in the chat. So does anybody know how OpenVPN config files work?
They have the key in both, right? Or well, it depends on how you set it up, your auth, right?
Yeah, you can, exactly. So you can have a username and password for the VPN, but you can also just do it with certificates. And so it is possible to have a self-contained config file that has everything that you would need in it, and you don't have to pass a username and password. Effectively, you should treat it like a password because it contains everything. So at this point, I'll just pause. That was kind of the OSINT part of it. And I do realize that because we're on Zoom and this is kind of a guided exercise, probably seemed a little bit contrived. But I hope that some of the principles that the OSINT principles that we went over, while fairly obvious, in real world OSINT doesn't tend to be quite so easy. But all of those things that we did would be things that would be commonly seen in the wild. The threat actors obviously use aliases, so we don't know if they're using aliases or not, but that's fairly common. But and they're sloppy, and you might say, well, that's kind of unrealistic that they would be sloppy. Well, it turns out that a lot of threat actors, even talented ones, are sloppy. So don't assume that all of them are uber hackers that have exceptional operational security. As I'm sure, I think Jeremy was on the call earlier. If not, Jeremy and Carlos and Stacy and some other folks can attest to the sloppiness of some of the people who are attacking us. So it's totally plausible that they would make some of the mistakes that we saw here. So if you've downloaded the OpenVPN file, at this point, if you want to continue to the actual engagement with the lab, you're welcome to do so, and that's going to be kind of the second half of this workshop. In order to do that, you will need to download an OpenVPN client and install it. So if you are on Linux, you can just do apt-get OpenVPN or yum install OpenVPN, and it'll do it all for you. If you are on Windows, you would go to the OpenVPN website. And I'm actually using 271. I've had trouble with 3 too. Your mileage may be better, at least under Windows 10. I've had trouble with it. So I've been using this older one, the 271. And if you're on OS X, Apple, then I think the preferred one is something called TunnelBlick.
Yeah, that works pretty well.
Yeah, people seem to like this. So you'll want to download probably the stable version of TunnelBlick. So I'll give everybody who wants to continue an opportunity to download the installer of their choice, or the client of their choice, and install it. And should be a pretty lightweight client. It's not. It's a pretty well respected project, and I wouldn't tell you to install something on your machine if I didn't trust it myself.
Of course we believe you.
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't that what this is about?
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong?
What I heard is Alex takes complete responsibility for all consequences of everyone doing this.
Well, so
We're only CIA.
We've only had a couple people on the VPN at any one time, so this will be an interesting load test. I don't know. I actually put a 10G connection on the server. I happen to have an old 10G NIC, so I put that on the server, but I'm afraid that there are probably other weak points that I haven't fully tested. So we'll see. This kind of goes back to what slide 2 or 3, where we were talking about security's messy and doesn't always work. A lot of security folks end up spending more time like fighting like pip installers and like Python dependencies than they do like your vision of this is that it's like uber hacking code, and instead it's like an hour of like trying to troubleshoot some Python dependency just to get it to work once, right? Like, at least that's been my experience, but maybe that's just because I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, the TunnelBlick website's a little old school, but it's a trusted project. I'll vouch for it. I've used it. I know it. I know lots of people who use it. If you're one of the cool kids, you're not using OpenVPN at all. You're using WireGuard, which is a kind of mesh overlay that all the the cool folks are using. So yeah, check it out, WireGuard. I don't know about Global Protect. What's Global Protect, Jesse? Tell me more. Oh, okay. It's a commercial product. Got it. Yeah, so everything I did for the lab is all like free, like whatever I could cobble together. Oh yeah, it looks like Karen, good idea. Looks like you can install it like that. Check the chat. If you're on OS X, it looks like you can do a brew command. All right, cool. Well, moving right along, this is like the cooking show where we've put the turkey into the oven and now we're taking the turkey out and it's already been cooked, right? So we've gotten through that section, and we have this OVPN file, and I'm actually already connected with it. So I can, this is the interface that you see on Windows. I'm not sure what the Tunnelblick interface looks like. In Linux, you just there's a GUI for like GNOME or whatever, but you can also just do OpenVPN --config and then the config file, and it'll fire the VPN. Has anybody successfully connected to the VPN?
I'm getting a hang on, it was giving me an error. Something about DNS, and then it went away real quick.
If it went away, it's probably fine. Like if it hard stops, it's probably failed. But if it's, if you want full DNS resolution within the lab, that's a good point. If you want full DNS resolution, you'll need to point your DNS to the pfSense router at 172.20.20.1, because on OpenVPN, it's hard to push DNS routes. It doesn't work reliably. It works sort of, and instead of trying to make it work, I just punted on it because I wanted to focus on other aspects other than making DNS.
Yeah, the DNS server address 111 is a public DNS, same with 888.
Yeah,
but is not being routed through the VPN.
Yeah, you should be able to. You could reset your. I could probably fix that. It's a good. I'll put that down on my list.
As if you don't have enough to do.
All right. So what you should do, you should get an IP address in. If I pull up my log here, or the status rather, let me pull up the status. Show status. So we should see that we should see an address being allocated in 10.10.10.0/24. If you see that. So you those who have connected should have an address in subnet 10.10.10.0/24.
Sounds like an old MCI commercial for dialing long distance. Dial 10-10-10.
I could pull up the router interface so we could take a look at that just to see if see how many people are connected. But let's continue before we lose any momentum here. So now we're connected. Let's get a command prompt here. Let's see what we're looking at. I'm going to use the Windows subsystem for Linux. So let's just see if I try to ping 172.20.20.1, that's the router interface for the pfSense. It looks like it's not responding. Let me try disconnecting. Can anybody ping 172.160 or 172.168.20.20.1?
Trying. Timeout.
Andrew is saying he can get to the firewall by going to 10.10.10.1.
On.
I'm getting it.
I got ping on 10.10.10.1.
ICMP may just be turned off on the firewall. Sorry, that's probably a bad test. So I think I think the pfSense drops ICMP echo requests by default. So never mind, my fault. So a good test would be try pinging 172.20.20. Whoa, that sounded like a klaxon horn. I hope we didn't set off any alerts.
22.
Yeah, I think maybe Amazon just arrived.
Oh. Okay.
That's funny.
That's pretty good. Okay. So yeah. So 22, 24, 35, 37, and 201 all are all up. Thank you, Andrew, for helping me out here. I'll pay you later. I really need like somebody to like, do the whole thing with me as if they're in the audience, but I didn't like coordinate with them. That would have been better than me like kind of guiding everybody through it. Okay, so excellent. So if we go back to our diagram here, we can see what we're working with here, which is that 201 is the Kali Linux machine. And then we've got 4 targets. So let's go back to our document here, and I'm scrolling down, and so we know what the mission is, and then here's the rules of engagement we haven't gone in. So again, only do this in a controlled environment where you have authorization to do so. You have authorization to do so here, so that's all good. Only open to Stanford community. So the lab network is a /24. We got to download the VPN account. You've done that. The explicit in-scope target range is 20.2 through 20.100. And this is a little bit of tongue in cheek, but the Kaos Corp threat actors used a Kali VM. They deployed a Kali VM inside of the Scoville lab network to do their dirty work. And they've conveniently left it behind for you. So if you'd like to commandeer their Kali box and use it for this, that should work well. And we're still a few hours away from the next reset, so I think we're in good shape. So how do you get to the Kali box? Well, if all we have is the OpenVPN file, does anybody want to offer a guess about where the creds might be for the Kali box?
Just the default ones, I'm guessing. Or well, in the Python maybe. Yeah. In
the Python script. That's not a bad idea. What about in the OpenConfig file, the OVPN file itself? Has anybody looked at the OVPN?
Yeah, I did. It has some certificates.
Does it have any? Is there a stanza at the top?
Yeah.
What does it tell us?
Forgot. I'm looking at it right now.
There's a KC agent username and a password at the very top.
Yes, there is.
Yeah.
So that first stanza is all commented out, but if you look at it, it looks like it looks like an installer script for Trapdoor. So the first, it looks like custom code that Kaos Corp deployed. So you can see the first line, they're deploying a pfSense box. They are generating this file. They're defining the network, And then they're deploying the Kali-Trojan.local machine at 172.20.20.201. And they've thoughtfully provided us with a username and password. So trapdoor set creds on 201. I'll put that in chat.
It's almost letting me in. It's the password. In.
So for those following along at home, if you're not familiar with SSH, it's a command line interface, secure shell. So we're going to do SSH, and then we're going to specify the username, which in this case is KC agent, Kaos Corp agent, and then and then specify the IP, which we also got from the config file.
3 people are there.
And then we're going to do photon hash 79-igloo. And we got a prompt. And it looks like we've got
Someone else came in.
3 or 4 people in.
Can we get a history before we start losing it?
What's that?
Can we get history?
History.
Right off the
That's
bat?
history. That is, who said that?
Wasn't me. Somebody else.
That was a great suggestion. So one of the first things you want to do when you get a box is check the history. Absolutely. You don't know, they might have put clear text creds in there. You might see what they're trying to set up. In this case, it doesn't look very interesting. Looks like they were checking what external IP they had, doing some basic things. At one point, they set up a netcat listener. Somebody said hi. Everybody's got root on this box, so you could just do sudo bash if you want. If you want a real root prompt, you can just do that. But just don't kick your teammates off, because
I'm a nice person.
technically this is out of scope, right? So 201 is outside of the range of 1 to 100. So so be nice. I gave it 16 gigs of RAM and I don't know, 4 procs, I think, so it should be reasonably. Karen says, can we send wall messages?
Oh, there's a Metasploit. Interesting.
Yeah, Kali has Metasploit.
Built. Yeah.
But so does Nessus. And is Qualys built on Metasploit too?
I don't think so.
Greenbone is.
I don't think so. Qualys is, I think, its own thing. Okay, so cool. So we've gotten this far and we've got multiple people logged on. If anybody is having trouble connecting who wants to connect, feel free to holler now. We want this to be as inclusive as possible. I'm happy to wait for people. Other people can go and explore at this point. But what I was going to do is I was going to spend the rest of our time, and I don't know that we need to go a whole nother hour, but I was going to use the rest of our time to just run through some common kind of attack vectors and techniques. And I'm going to focus on ones that are easier and less, advanced, because I think that might be more useful. And I want to leave, there's something for everyone here. There are multiple pathways. There is no single one answer to this. These machines are compromisable multiple ways. And there are hard ways to compromise them, and there are easy ways to compromise them. And when I say easy, I mean ridiculously easy to compromise. So there should be something for everybody. And if you get a root on one box right away, just bear in mind that there's other ways to get root on it as well. And I may take away some of the easy paths as time goes on, but I did want to provide some opportunity for folks who maybe never have used these tools before to get a feel for what it's like. So what I've done, if we scroll down in our document here, let me just minimize this if there's anything in chat that I should pay attention, hopefully somebody can holler at me. Keep coming down. So here's the workshop cheat sheet that I put together. And these are the things I'm going to go over for the next, I don't know, 20 minutes or something like that. If this seems like too easy or you want to go explore on your own, you're welcome to do that. But I'm going to go through these things. And so anybody who's logged on or just wants to follow along can do so. So we're going to start with Nmap. So Nmap is the Swiss Army knife of network scanning. It's a very well-respected tool that's been around for a couple decades, and it's really the starting point for almost all scanning and enumeration. There are other tools, but most of them are based on this, either by code or by concept. So we're going to start with Nmap, and then we're going to stick to the range that is our in-scope range. When you're doing penetration testing work, you always want to be very careful to stick to the scope. Otherwise, you will get dinged for it. So Nmap will accept all kinds of arguments, and we can go over some of those, but like you can do ranges like this. So you can say 2 through 100. You can also use a comma like this. So you could say 2 and then 172, 20, you specify multiple IPs like that. We're just going to let it rip on 2.100, just like that, with no switches, which means it's just going to run the default scan. And you can do this. That went pretty fast. So let's just scroll back up and take a look at what we found. So it looks like 22 is a host called Habanero at Scoville.local. It's got SSH and 80 open, and then something on 10,000. The next is Pimento, and it's got, looks like 22 and 6667, which is IRC. Anaheim is 20.35. And judging by the number of ports open there, what kind of operating system is that? Don't everybody jump in at once here.
That's Windows.
Windows.
That would definitely be Windows. And then Cayenne at 20.37 is also up and has even more ports open. And I'll call your attention to this 88. You see that Kerberos being open? That and the LDAP is a pretty good sign that that's probably a domain controller, Active Directory domain controller. So this appears to be a Windows client of some sort, workstation, and this appears to be a server. So for those who haven't used Nmap, what it's doing here is it's basically just port scanning the top 1,000 TCP ports that it has a list of. And it's not scanning 1 through 1,000. Nmap ships with a list of default ports, which can be changed. And so the default scan simply scans for the 1,000 most common TCP ports. And then what it's reporting to the screen there is the state being open, if it finds it open, and then whatever service it's going to guess it is. But it doesn't actually check to see if that's the service. It just looks at its little text file and it says, oh, 80 is open, so that must be, World Wide Web, or 53 is open, so that must be DNS, or, and it goes down the road. And that's why it's so fast, because it's not actually interrogating those ports. It's just seeing that they're open and then quickly assigning them a kind of known service based upon its service list. So if we want to do something a little bit fancier, we can do this. Somebody said T5 for go fast. That's an excellent idea. If you use T5 in a production environment, you may end up bringing people's services down. So you're welcome to try it here, because we can always roll these machines back. But let's pick a host. And I'm going to pick, in this case, let's do 35, which we believe to be the workstation. So I'm going to do SC, or SB, which is version detection. So what this does is it actually interrogates the open port and then tries to determine if the service that's on that open port is what it has in its list, and then tries to pull a banner from it or use other methods to determine the actual version of whatever that service is. And then SC is safe scripts. So what that's going to do is Nmap has a kind of a concept of plugins that they call NSEs. And so what SC does is if it finds a port that's open and it has an NSE, a plugin that matches whatever that service is, then it'll run that. But it will only run it if it's safe. And safe means like it has a low probability of bringing the service down. So this is a more invasive scan that will take a little bit longer. So we'll just start this up and then let it run in the background. And we can do, why don't we do T4 instead of T5? So we'll just let this run. And in Nmap, you can always press return a couple times, and what it'll do is it'll spit out a update on where it is in the scan. So you see it's 58% done. So while that's running, I'll just go ahead and fire up another terminal so that we can play around with multiple things. I could use like screen or something like that if I wanted to, but I'd rather have two screens right now.
Are these things, the machines named after things that Fedor likes?
No, it was the whole Scoville lab, the whole Pepper lab. So
yeah.
Remember, they're a research lab that focuses on, you know, the medical and industrial uses of peppers, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So I don't know. I was trying not to take myself too seriously.
I like it. It's great. Thank you.
So one of the things, one of the first things, you know, to look at when you're looking at an environment like this is like, everybody kind of jumps to like, well, let's run Metasploit or something like that. But just looking at this, we notice some obvious things. Like, for example, there's a website here, right? So what we should do is we should just go to that website and actually, you know, take a look. So this looks to be their intranet site running on port 80 of 22. And then let's see if there's any other 80s open. Oh, our other script finished. Looks like 37 is also open. So 170.20.37 on 80. Okay, so this is a second web server. Looks like this web server is running on the domain controller, which is not great practice, right? This is interesting. It says contact our administrators if you have any questions, and it lists the administrators, and it also lists them in a format that looks like usernames, right? So if you get that, then that's a pretty good clue that you know the format that all the usernames for the domain are going to be in, especially because, you know, it's running on the domain controller. So that's that. Just kind of from an operational security standpoint, we have a pretty good guess about that. There's some other interesting things here, like it's kind of odd that X11 would be running on a domain controller. So this 6000 looks interesting, as does, you know, like 6667 IRC on 24. That's a chat protocol, an old school chat protocol.
Yeah.
So if we scroll down here, this is the more invasive scan. This is the SVSC scan for 20.35. And you can see, let me pull my window out a little bit here. Oh yeah, somebody pointed out VNC. Nice. So VNC is, I think VNC, if you see VNC in your environment, you should cringe immediately because it is insecure by default. And rarely, you know, rarely necessary, except for under kind of extreme circumstances. So VNC should make your spider sense kind of kick off for certain. So this more invasive scan of the Windows box gives us some good information. Looks like we're running Windows 7. It tells us the name, Anaheim, right? We get a MAC address. We get the domain. All of that is fairly interesting. So why don't we, I'm going to go back to my, what did I do with my other document here? All right. And you guys can either follow along with me, or you're welcome to explore and ask questions as you see fit. And if anybody roots a box or gets somewhere, gets a shell, let me know. In fact, let's say
Windows 7. Oh boy.
Windows 7, yeah. All right, so let's look at this. So let's look at, we know it's Windows 7. And so there's some likelihood that it could be vulnerable to any number of early Windows flaws. So let's look at, I'm going to run this command here, which is nmap, and it's only going to scan port 445, and it's going to run all of the SMB scripts. So you see that that script -script says run all the NSEs, the plugins for nmap that start with SMB-* right? So we're going to run all of those. And these will interrogate the SMB service fairly aggressively and see if there's anything interesting there.
Well, it's SMB2 also, not version. Isn't 3 the latest version?
Yeah, I don't even think they patched 7 for 3.
Yeah.
But you can turn 1 off, which is, fraught with all kinds of nasty stuff.
It's just service pack 1.
SP1, yeah. Okay, so we'll let that run for a little while. Why don't we try looking at some of the web services while we're at it. So let's see. Okay, so GoBuster is not installed. There's Derb and there's Dirbuster. These are programs that recursively go through a web server and look for interesting directories. Okay, so but I like GoBuster better. So let's just do sudo apt-get install GoBuster. GoBuster is multi-threaded, so it's a bit faster. You're welcome to install anything you want on these machines. Bear in mind that in an hour and 40 minutes, they'll be reset. Okay, so now we should have GoBuster installed, and we do, right? So let's look at the, I've got my cheat sheet here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do GoBuster, and then we're looking for directories, and then we're going to issue -u and pass it the URL, and then -w and give it a word list. Okay, so it's going to try every kind of stemming directory off of that word list. So GoBuster dir is the scan type, URL, and then HTTP 172.20.20. What do we say we're gonna do? 37, right? And then W, and then you got to know where to find the word lists in Kali. So they're under user share, and then let's see, there's no. If you go to Dirbuster, so we're going to use GoBuster, but we're going to use Dirbuster's word list, if that makes any sense. So because the Dirbuster install comes with a pretty good word list. So if you look at the word list, there's a couple different options here. I'm going to go with directory list, lowercase. Oops, looks like I forgot a lowercase. And then we'll do small. So this is the smallest of the kind of the word list, right? So there it's starting. It's just gonna, you'll see it just kind of crank through those directories. You can also give it more threads. So you can say, I think it's -T for threads, and I think the default is 10. but you could go up to like 20 or so. I wouldn't go too far past 20 unless you're dealing with a really robust web server, because it will promptly DOS your system. So it got one hit for a directory called users. So let's go check it out. Interesting. So we get, so first observation is directory listing is turned on, which is never a good thing. And second observation is that there is a single file called users.txt. And if we click that, it looks like we have a list of everybody in the current lab. So this is important because if you're going after credentials, if you're trying to attack credentials, remember that usernames are just as important as passwords. People are always like, well, we got to get the password. Well, if you don't know the username, the password's not very useful. So, you know, sometimes usernames like administrator are fairly common, or root or admin, but in some cases they're not. And so really getting a list of usernames is just as important as getting a list of passwords or hashes. So now we have a list of current lab members. So that's somewhat interesting. Let's see how many people are connected now. Oh, we got more people connected. Excellent. Has anybody found anything interesting?
I've been mostly just following along with you.
Okay, that's fine. It'll be up and you can come back and play around. All right, this scan is still running. This is the SMB script scan. So we're just going to let it go. Looks like it's kind of stuck on 91.67. So we'll just let that go for a second while we poke around. So we did get a list of users. So that's interesting. Why don't we try brute forcing a user, right? So one of the most common, although not the best, password list is called RockU. And what it is it's a collection of passwords that were kind of amalgamated based upon a number of breaches. So the idea is that it is the most common possible passwords for, you know, that are out there in the wild. It's a little dated and there are better ones, but I'm going to use it because it's already pre-installed in Kali. So we're going to cd to user share word lists and look in there. And you can see it's gzipped up because it's kind of big. So we're just going to do sudo gzip d, or you could use unzip or whatever, RockU. Well, it'll take a second. And if you just look at it, oops, you'll see it's just, you know, passwords, right? Like as many passwords as, oh man, I just lost my, okay. So what we're going to do here is we have a list of users, right? That we got from the user page. Bam, we got some users. So I'm going to select Yoder simply because Yoder's got the coolest name out of them. And if you're wondering, I actually used a Python script to generate these usernames. So they're completely, also, if you're easily offended, just bear in mind that these password lists will often have colorful language. So just bear that in mind. If there is some colorful language that ends up hitting the screen, I apologize. That is just part of the nature of this business. People use all kinds of things for passwords that they probably shouldn't. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a program called Hydra. Hydra is a brute forcing application that's built into Kali. There are others. It's reasonably good. It also is multi-threaded. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pass Hydra a user. You know, you can pass it a complete user with an uppercase L. You can give it like a text file with all the users that you want to try. In this case, we're just going to go after Yoder, right? Okay. So we're going to do lowercase L, and then we're going to do the name of the user. What's his Yoder's last name is Mullins. So Hydra, and then we're going to do -P to pass it the word list. So P, USR, share, word list, rock you, right? And then we're going to specify the IP address as the target, and then the protocol SMB, and then V is for verbose, and F is quit when you find something good. So SMB, and then V for verbose, and F, lowercase f for quit. What did we do wrong here?
Lowercase p.
Is it? No. What's it want? Oh, it'd help if we gave it an IP to attack, right? So let's give it an IP. And I think we want to put that before the protocol. Yep. So we put the IP address right before the protocol. -35 is going to be our target. -V for verbose. Okay. I didn't like that for some reason. Invalid reply. Interesting. Let's try the domain controller. Maybe we'll have better luck there. That looks more promising. Okay, we got to log in. Yoder Mullins' password is Margarita. So now we have a login, and we would essentially, we would pivot off of that at that point probably. And we could do that, but I was going to spend a little bit of time on the Linux web server instead.
Does Yoder like Jimmy Buffett?
I don't know. It was just, I used this script to generate a bunch of names, and it came up with that list. So I figured that was kind of the easiest way to do it. All right, before we go anywhere else, let's just all the stuff I've been doing so far is like kind of manual stuff that uses tools, but it's like essentially like, normally when you're doing kind of an offensive engagement, what you do is you start by doing an in-map scan to just get a feel for how big the network is and what's on it. And then you're going to enumerate each of the targets. And by enumeration, I mean find all the services that are running on those targets, right? And then once you have that enumerated list of services, you're going to identify the most interesting services and explore those. And then eventually you're going to attack those services. But a lot of people kind of just jump to the whole attacking part, where really one of the more important phases is the whole enumeration part, right? So, I'd like to just show, I mean, this is kind of the quintessential example of how easy hacking can be, and how powerful some of these tools are. I think the first time I saw it, I was like, wow, this is a lot simpler than I thought it was, which is pretty scary, right? Because anybody with even a modest level of understanding can kind of get started in this. And if you're not well defended, you can get compromised fairly easy. So I'll give a kind of a quintessential example of that. We're going to fire up Metasploit, Metasploit is a attack framework that's very popular. It comes pre-installed on Kali. It was written by the guy who founded Rapid7, which is a company that competes in the kind of head-to-head with Qualys. And so this is Metasploit, and this is essentially a one-stop hacking tool with everything kind of built in. This is the so-called easy button. So if we go back to our previous scan, looks like it's stuck at 67. So what we would find if this had completed, and so I'm going to just go ahead, what we would find is that this SMB, this in-map SMB scan that we ran against 35 would show that the Windows 7.
The Tesla is 430. Today it's 421. Yesterday we buy the QQQ. It's 246. So $2 difference. So now can you sell the QQQQ yesterday one?
Yeah. Okay. So I thought that was related to the scenario, but I don't think it is. So if this had finished, what you would see is that it had identified the host 20.35 as being vulnerable to Eternal Blue, which is the exploit that the NSA wrote and basically held under wraps for a number of years and used for their own purposes. And then that exploit was leaked, and the NSA kind of didn't look real good, and they had to kind of tell Microsoft right away that they had essentially sat on this exploit for years and had been using it without telling anybody. So Eternal Blue was that exploit, and if this script had finished, we would see that the server in question is or the workstation in question is vulnerable to Eternal Blue. So what I've done is I've launched MSF console, which is the Metasploit console, and then I'm going to specify a module to use within Metasploit, and all the modules are kind of in this format. And if you see, what you can do is you can see it's use exploit Windows SMB and then the particular module. But since that's kind of hard to find, you can also just search for a string for Eternal Blue, for example, or you could search for MS17 MS1710, which is the CVE for this particular exploit. So it makes it a little bit easier to the search function makes it a little bit easier to find things. So what we're going to do is we're going to use number 2 there. So we can do use 2 and it'll automatically select that. And then it says no payload configured, defaulting to Meterpreter reverse TCP. So the Meterpreter shell is a Metasploit kind of Metasploit specific shell that's used for command and control of compromised hosts. So in this case, because we didn't specify a payload, it just automatically assumed that we might want to use it. So now we're going to type options, and this is going to show us what kinds of things we need to set on this host. So we're going to do, if you look at it says current setting, and then some of those are filled in, and then required, yes or no. So effectively what you have to do is you have to set every setting that is required that doesn't currently have a value, right? So we're going to do set our hosts, and then we're going to give it the IP address of that Windows machine. 445 has already been set, so we're good. These are not required. We don't actually need a username and password. This exploit is a remote code execution, unauthenticated remote code execution. And then down here are the local options. And so we're going to set the local host is us. It's 172.20.20.201. And this is where the reverse shell is going to come back to. Okay, so what we're going to do is this exploit is going to target this Windows server. It is going to run the exploit. It is then going to send a stager with the payload to that machine. It uses a technique that injects the malicious code into a DLL. and then kind of instantiates the Metasploit, this Metasploit binary in the Windows machine. And then that binary is going to call back to us, and we're going to have a listener set up. So this is called a reverse shell. So we're attacking, we're pushing in a process basically as a DLL. We're hijacking a DLL. That process is going to reach back to us and give us a shell, and it's never going to touch disk. So it's only going to happen in memory. So our local host is already set to the appropriate value, but you see the L port is 4444. So Metasploit defaults to 4444. If you ever log on to any sort of Linux or Windows box and see 4444 as their process running on that, you should be very concerned. Most red teamers and a lot of attackers never change the default. So if it's if they're using the default, that'll show up as quad 4. A lot of times they'll set it to like 5555 or 6666 or 7777. This is the TCP port. I should have been more clear. This is the TCP port that's going to come back that you're going to listen on. And the reason that they use 4 of any number is it's just easier to type. So why do something complicated when you can either just use the default or type 5555? So in this case, we're going to set L port to, let's call it, we're not going to do the defaults. We'll do 9999. Okay. And now if we look at options again, we'll see that's all set up. And then we're just going to run exploit. So it's running the exploit. It's attempting to exploit the SMB service, SMB1 with Eternal Blue. This is a fairly reliable, but not always exploit. So I'd say 70–80% of the time it works. Sometimes you can run it again and it'll work the second time. See what happens. Curious if this scan ever finished. No. I get the feeling that this one stalled out. Okay, it failed on its first try. So it overwrote the place in memory that it was supposed to overwrite, but it wasn't able to continue the exploit. So it tries again. If somebody has already exploited this box with this, then the likelihood that it'll work again is a bit lower. As you exploit, oftentimes when you exploit certain vulnerabilities, the box will become increasingly unstable over time. So if this fails, then this is very realistic in that respect. We can kind of let that run. We could also try hitting the domain controller as well. So I guess I should mention that, every one of these things that we've done, there is a kind of corollary defensive, technique that we're kind of demonstrating a deficiency in, right? So with Nmap, all of the local firewalls on these machines are turned off. So we're getting we're able to enumerate all of those services, defensively. You shouldn't be exposing services that don't have a business need. So they should either be firewalled off, or the service should simply be stopped or removed. So that's fairly obvious. We've exploited, excuse me, we've exploited directory listing on web servers. We've certainly exploited information that's publicly available that shouldn't be available, like word lists. And then obviously all the OSINT that we did earlier. We brute force some passwords. So I think that's a fairly obvious one, which is, defensively, you should be enforcing strong passwords or using other sort of defensive measures like two-factor authentication or anti-hammer protections like, fail to ban or something like that. So these are kind of all kind of fairly obvious examples. And then this one, the Metasploit Eternal Blue, is obviously related to, is obviously a clear case for patching your machines. So this didn't work on the 35. Why don't we just try 37? And I think, so Windows 7 can be exploited with Eternal Blue without any username or password, but 2012 R2 needs at least a domain user in order to exploit. So if we look at options, there's an option to put that in. So, and we have a user, right? So we know, so let's do set SMB domain, and that's Scoville, right? Set SMB pass is Yoder's password, which is Margarita, right? Set SMB user is Yoder Mullins. Let's see. Oh. Host does not appear to be vulnerable. Interesting. Okay, so it doesn't think that, let's make sure we set that right. Yep, it doesn't think that it's vulnerable. I'm gonna just try 35 one more time to see if I can get it, but I'm gonna move on to another. Are there any questions? I know let's see, we've only got about 20 more minutes, so happy to take any questions.
Keep going. It's interesting. Thank you.
Cool. All right. Sorry, I'm a little hoarse. I apologize. Let's just quit this. I think that was probably never going to finish because it was just something had happened.
Alex, did you say that you were going to continue with this later this week in workshop?
What I was going to do is maybe, I don't know about this week, but I was thinking maybe next week I would do like the full speed run through, like, and I was going to, we're actually preparing for a cyber competition that's this Friday, or I'm sorry, this Saturday, that I'm not only coaching, but I'm also the regional organizer for. So I've been a little bit, I haven't had a lot of time. And normally what I would love to do is have one of the students from our offensive team come in and do what I'm doing. Not only are they much better at it, but they're more fun to watch. So maybe if that competition is done with next week, I might be able to do like a speed run the following week with some of the students, and they can show you what a kind of professional operator looks like. I'm not nearly as fast as they are, but that would be fun. So if there's interest in this, I'd be happy to do that. I'm not going to give away kind of I'm not going to walk you through getting the final flags, which is, what we need to do is we need to exploit the domain controller, and then we need to retrieve a file from the domain controller, and then we need to exploit the Linux box and retrieve the key from the Linux box. And once we have the key and the file, it's a Veracrypt archive. Veracrypt is the iteration of TrueCrypt, which is an open source encryption project. And so effectively you have a file in there that's a TrueCrypt archive or a Veracrypt archive, and the password or the key that you're going to retrieve from the Linux box is going to decrypt that. And I don't really have a prize for you or anything like that, but once you solve that, then you'll unlock the precious Scoville data. So I'd be happy to kind of walk through that, but I'd rather people get a chance to try to do it. Although some of the techniques I've already showed today would get you pretty far in achieving achieving that that goal. So for some reason, this eternal blue exploit is failing on 35. So when the whole system resets at 4 o'clock, almost assuredly this will work again. So if you want to try this after 4, you won't get dropped from the VPN because the VPN server doesn't reboot. So your shell will drop to the jump host, but you can reconnect to the jump host and you can try exactly what I did right there. And if you do it shortly after 4, I can almost guarantee that it will work for you because I did test these. So we can simulate or not simulate, but we can kind of go at this another way, which is, let's use a different exploit. So we have the known credentials. And so let's use exploit Windows SMB PS exec. And let's see if we can use Yoder's credentials.
Alex, really quickly, while you're doing this, we have about 15 minutes left in the workshop, and we are supposed to be picking a raffle winner.
Oh, yeah.
And so I've kind of gone through and chosen somebody at random, and that person is Brian Stubblefield. So Brian Stubblefield, you are our workshop raffle prize winner.
Is Brian still on?
He is.
Excellent. And what is the prize? I think
That's
it's
a great question.
I think it's a $20. I think it's a $20 gift card.
I think you're right. I wanted to get the amount correct, and so I can definitely verify that. But I believe it is a $20 Amazon gift card.
Oops. This should have been Margaret. Mm-hmm. Let's see, what did we miss here? SMB pass, Margarita. Let's try. I'm going to try. So I've got another. I'm not convinced this box is stable, so I'm going to use the last of my time to look at the Linux box. Because I want to give we spent a lot of time on Windows, and I want to give just a little bit of flavor for Linux exploitation. So this is the intranet site, and I'm currently logged in because I was messing with this, but we'll log off. We can see that it's running WordPress. It says powered by WordPress down here. And it doesn't really seem to have a lot on it, right? And so one of the things you can do off the bat is I would just, when you're collecting information about a site like this, you're going to look through the site and look for any kind of information that may be in the site itself. Look for blog posts, comments, those sorts of things. Use the search feature to see if you can find kind of any sensitive information like, usernames or passwords, stuff like that. And we know, like, just based upon the fact that it's WordPress, we know things like we know the login will be WP-login or WP-admin. So that's, that's a good place to start. We could start with some, some common default creds. But let me also show you, there is a application called, and again, this is all in the document, so you can kind of follow along, and I'll add some more stuff to this over time. But we can use this command here, WP scan. And what it is it's a WordPress scanner that's built into Kali. And what it's going to do is enumerate the WordPress site and look for anything that's suspect. Oh, looks like it crashed. Let's try sudoing that. Looks a little bit better. All right, so what this did is it went through and enumerated the site and dumped anything that looked kind of interesting. It gave us some version numbers, but it also identified a number of features and a number of plugins. If you're familiar with WordPress, you know that they're notorious for having insecure plugins. So WP cron, it tells us what theme is in use. It shows us that the photo gallery plugin is installed, a plugin called social warfare, something called WSpritz. What you would do if you were engaging this target is you would go to a site called CVE Details, which is essentially a clearinghouse of CVEs, and CVEs are common vulnerabilities and exposures. And you could simply go through all of these items here and try to find any, any of these plugins that may have a CVE for them. And if there was, then you could probably either, depending on the type of CVE, this is a fairly low one, it's out of a scale of 10. Depending on how severe it was, you may be able to find an exploit module, or it may be so trivial that you can simply do it manually. So, I'll leave that as a exercise for the user. But if we go back to this site, and I'll just give you a hint. Let's say, if you do have a search function, start looking for things like user, right? And here's a blog post that wasn't published to the front page that includes a little missive about, well, this guest is enabled, right? This is a little bit of a stretch, but not really. You find this sort of thing all the time. So at this point, we've got a login for guest, and where do we go for logging in? We can go to WP admin or user. Okay, now we are logged in as guest, who has been granted more privileges than they should have granted them, and we now have control of the application. And there are other ways I'm not going to go into right now that you could gain control of the WordPress application through various other vulnerabilities and exposures. But for the sake of time, I'm using this one to just kind of cut to the chase because time is short. And so what we're going to do is we have control of the site, but we don't have control of the underlying operating system yet. And so what we're going to do is we're going to instantiate a reverse shell from the PHP application. Okay, so what we need to do over here is we're going to run netcat, and netcat is going to essentially, we're going to set up a listener. Okay, so this command here, we're going to put it on, let's just put it on 7777. Okay, so what this is going to do is it'll set up a netcat listener that we're going to connect back to from our PHP code. That if we do this correctly, we're going to get a shell. So it's listening on any IP address, and it's waiting for a connection. And then what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to appearance and editor. It's telling us we probably shouldn't be doing this. And we're just going to pick a page. And in this case, we're going to use archive. Okay, so we're going to load archive.php. There's a bunch of PHP code in here. Yep, we don't need that. We're going to go and grab a one-liner reverse shell. So this is one line of code. That's it. We're just going to paste it in there. We're going to change the port to 777 because that's where we set up our listener. So what this command does is it basically tells PHP to bind bash to or to use bash to create a socket to the IP address that we've specified and the port that we've specified. Except for I've got the IP address wrong because 22 is the web server, and our reverse shell is a reverse shell handler is on 201, which is our Linux box, and we're hoping that nobody else has used 7777. So we're going to update this file. Okay. So now, how do we actually get this shell to work? Right. Well, it's kind of, I guess to me, it's kind of counterintuitive, but we're just going to go and load that page, because when we go and load that page, it's going to happily run this PHP code and create our reverse shell for us. So here is the URL that corresponds to that particular archive.php. So if we got this right, we just got a connection. You can see we're listening on 777. We've got a connection from 20.22, and now we have a shell. And if we type ls, we can get listing. If we type who am I, we can see that we are the user www.data. So this shell is kind of ugly, and we might lose it fairly easily. So there's an easy way to upgrade your shell to using Python. If the web server in question is a Linux box, almost assuredly has Python installed. So you can just paste this straight into the kind of low-end shell that you have, and it should give you something closer to a full shell. So now I've got, it's not quite, still doesn't have like tab completion and stuff like that. But we can run some, we can run some basic stuff. So that's shelling a Linux web server. And I think I'm about 5 minutes before we come up on time. Here's a Metasploit module that does exactly what I just did, except for fully automated. So if you want to check out kind of how to do it in an automated way, you can do this. But I think the manual method is a little bit more instructive. I was hoping to show how to interact with a meterpreter shell, but maybe I can do that real quick. So let's just so I'm going to use the same WordPress reverse shell. We're going to do this the automated way. So we're going to do set our hosts 172.20.20.22. We're going to do set username guest. We're going to set user. We're going to set password to guest. And looks like that's about it.
Alex, we are at a little bit under 2 minutes left.
Excellent. Let's see. Demo gods. Meterpreter shell. Okay, so the meterpreter shell is it is a purpose-built pen testing shell that has essentially a bunch of functionality, and it works on both Windows and Linux, and the commands are the same, but it kind of executes differently in the background. It's got a nice little help menu. You can list processes. You can kill processes. You can transfer files. You can read files. You can do things like turn the webcam on. You can record audio. It's quite devious. And it also is really nice if you've got multiple shells. So what I can do is I can background the shell, and then I can have it just hanging out. So you see that? So now let's say I want to go shell another box. Now I can basically just keep collecting shells down at the seashore, if you will. And if I want to enter that shell again, I just indicate the name of the shell, and now I'm back. If I want a real shell, I can just type shell, and I can get back to the kind of netcat shell that I showed you before. But this is just a really nice way to interact with a compromised host. You could even use Meterpreter basically as a configuration control system because it has essentially all that functionality. And I think that's about all I have time for. So if there's any questions, you can find me on, I hope this has been somewhat entertaining. You can find me, where? You can find me at AX Keller at Stanford, or you can find me at hashtag Kaos Corp on the Stanford COP. So I'll be hanging out on there, and I'd be happy to help people with these exercises for the rest of the week.
And Alex, how long do the participants have access to the range?
I hadn't set a date to take it down, so if there's interest, I can keep it up for a while. My plan is to add some more targets this week, and I'll announce those in the hashtag Kaos-Corp Slack channel on Stanford COP, and maybe sometime next week I'll take it down.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, and thank you for facilitating, Carlos.
Yeah, let me know, Alex, if you're going to run that speed run and with the students. I'd be very interested in watching one of those events.
Yeah, I didn't want to bring in any students today because they are so slammed with classes, and then they're going to be competing this weekend, both Saturday and Sunday, and so I felt like it would be better if I just kind of did it myself. But I would love to get, it's always great to see the students taking the lead, and they're a lot of fun to watch. So I would.
Oh, sorry, Alex. Is there any chance of capturing some of that competition footage and letting us take a look at what speed looks like in the real world?
The competition is under embargo until the nationals takes place in January. And so if there's any artifacts from that, it wouldn't be releasable until after January 10th. So there's a regional, and then if we do well, then we'll advance to the nationals. But we won't be able to disclose anything about the environment to anybody, because otherwise it would be unfair to other teams. And so they have an embargo on sharing, tweeting, kind of anything that would give any other team an advantage. Maybe in January
then?
I'm sorry?
After the new year then?
Yeah, after the new year, I could certainly share some of this, and I could share stuff from the last competitions. So Stanford has won the collegiate cyber penetration testing competition 3 years in a row at the national level. So we have quite a few artifacts from those prior competitions, including last year. The team found 2 0 days during the competition, responsibly reported the zero, responsibly reported the 0 days to the vendors, and both were patched within the 3-day competition weekend, which floored the organizers, as you can imagine, because it was, that's like a fairy tale story, right? 2 0 days, responsibly disclosed, and the vendor actually patched all within 3 days. And one of those was it was a cryptocurrency trading platform in which we found evidence that the flaw that we had found had actually been used in a $1 million heist. about a month before. So pretty serious discovery, and kind of emblematic of the beginning of my slide deck, which is that defense and offense are intrinsically linked, and we should treat them as two sides of the same coin. I've run over time, I realize. Great.
Thank you very, very much, Alex.